Welcome to Binge Breakthrough, the podcast designed to help you finally break through the barriers that keep you stuck, feeling out of control around food. I'm Master Certified Coach Jane Pilger, and I want you to know that no matter how long you've been struggling or what you've tried, food freedom is possible, and I'm here to show you how. After years of therapy, eating disorders treatment, restrictive diets, and reading all the books, I was still stuck in the on-again, off-again cycle of restricting and binging until I was able to see it all from a new perspective that changed everything. Each week, I will share the strategies, tools, and mindset that allowed me to overcome my decades-long battle with binge eating. Your journey to body trust starts now. Let's dive in. Hello, trusted listener. Welcome to Binge Breakthrough. I consider you a trusted listener because I trust that you are listening to this podcast for a reason. I trust that you're going to hear something today that is insightful and impactful on your journey with food. So today we're talking about change and how change really works. Now, in the last 2 episodes, we've been exploring setbacks and how to navigate setbacks on your journey to becoming more calm, connected, and confident with food. In the first of these 2 episodes, we went through some typical examples of someone who might be thinking, I thought I had it all figured out, but now I'm back in the cycle of feeling out of control around food. And in the second episode, we talked about turning your setbacks into stepping stones and how to do that. We talked about the difference between how confident people handle setbacks and how pessimistic people handle setbacks. So if you haven't listened to these episodes and right now you find yourself in a period of setback, I highly recommend you go back and revisit them. I'll be sure to put links in the show notes to make them super easy for you to find. But today we're going to wrap up this discussion by talking about how change really works. What happens is that many people simply just don't understand how change works, and they get it wrong when they're evaluating their own attempts to change a habit, a behavior, or any aspect of their lives. So my goal with this episode is to paint a clear picture for you of how change works so that you can identify yourself at any point in the cycle. You're going to be able to apply this not only to your journey with food, but to any aspect of your life where you are wanting to make a change. So let's dive in. Now, the first thing to know is that change happens in cycles. And we're going to talk about the different stages of the cycle, and I'm going to give you examples along the way. So this cycle that I'm talking about, this concept, it's called the cycle of change. And it was developed by Prochaska and DiClemente in the early 80s. And they developed this cycle during a study with participants who were trying to stop smoking. And this cycle of change is one of the most widely adopted models for lasting behavioral change. So let's talk about the cycle. In the cycle of change, there are 6 stages. I'm going to name the stages for you, and then we're going to dive into each stage. So the 6 stages of the cycle of change. Stage number 1, pre-contemplation. Stage number 2, contemplation. Stage number 3, preparation. Stage number 4, action. Stage number 5, maintenance. Stage number 6, relapse. Now, I have a visual of these stages that I will also include a link to so that you can see. If you're more of a visual learner and you would love to see this visually, I will include a link to into the Substack where you can see the visual of this cycle with the 6 stages. All right, we're going to dive into each stage. But first, I want to make sure that you caught what I said. Did you catch that number 6, stage number 6, it's relapse? Yes, that's right. Relapse is an official stage in the cycle of change because it is very common. Now, we're going to get into this further, but for now, just be aware that relapse is a part of change. It is not a problem. It is not a sign that you haven't changed or that you won't continue to change. All right. Let's dive in to each stage a little bit more. Stage number 1, pre-contemplation. In this phase, there is often not even awareness that a problem exists. There is no intention to change because it's not clear that there even is an issue. So if you've been listening to me for any period of time, you know that I love to say that awareness is the first step, and you can't change what you aren't aware of. Pre-contemplation, it's essentially pre-awareness. I've had several people tell me over the years they never knew they were a binge eater until they started listening to me. And once they heard me talk about it and heard me share some of my own stories, they were able to see their own behavior. Up until that moment that they had awareness, oh, actually, I think I binge. Up until before then, they were in pre-contemplation. Once they realized, oh, I think I binge. I think I might want to do something about this. I think I might want to change this. Then we go into contemplation, stage number 2. In stage number 2, you know you have a problem. The awareness is there, but you might not have the confidence to take a step forward. So you're thinking about it. Clues to recognizing yourself in this stage include uncertainty. You might have conflicted emotions or maybe even ambivalence about changing. So in this stage, there is no commitment to changing the problem, just awareness of its existence coupled with doubt or uncertainty about actually making a change. So this might sound like, I know I have a problem, but I'll always be this way. It's just who I am. And I've tried several things before, but nothing works for me. That's contemplation, stage number 2. Now, stage number 3 in the cycle is preparation. And in this stage, you are intent on taking action to solve the problem. You might be taking small step forwards, and you're convinced that change would be beneficial for you. You also have more belief that you can make the change. So this might look like listening to a podcast or starting to get curious about what change might look like. Stage number 4 is action. Now, in this stage, you have clear plans for change and you are implementing them. This is where the rubber meets the road and you're actually doing the work. You're developing new skills. You're practicing new responses. You're getting feedback. You're learning. You're growing. You are expanding your emotional capacity. You're opening up to your experiences versus going straight for the food. You might sign up for a course or you've hired professional support to give you clear guidance on the steps you need to take and to get feedback and work through your challenges. That's step number 4. Step number 5 is maintenance. Now, in this stage, you've regularly been practicing the new skills and you have sustained change. So we're talking probably at least 6 months of your new skills. They feel pretty regular. The new behaviors have replaced the old ones. This feels more like what you do now. This is where you've shifted your identity as an eater. You now feel calm, connected, and confident with food most of the time. You no longer feel out of control, and you are trusting yourself around all foods in all situations. Now, stage number 6 is relapse. In this stage, you fall back into old patterns of behavior. And sometimes this happens without any awareness. And if that's the case, and you don't even realize that you've kind of gone back to old patterns of behavior, then you go right back to pre-contemplation, stage number 1. You're not even aware there's a problem yet. But often you know there's a problem. So you skip pre-contemplation and you go straight to contemplation. But either way, this is a cycle. We go from relapse to either pre-contemplation or contemplation. Then we go back through the steps. Now, before we go more into relapse, I want it to be very clear that it is possible for somebody to stay years in maintenance at the maintenance stage or to never have a relapse. Relapse isn't guaranteed, but it is so common as people change that it does happen, which means it has its own stage. This doesn't mean everybody's going to be there. It doesn't mean it's going to happen often. And the maintenance stage, you could be in the maintenance stage for a long time, for years. You could be there for the rest of your life. And you also could have a relapse. Now, the amount of time that you spend in relapse might depend on the resilience that you've developed through the process of change. It might depend on your support system, the coping skills that you've developed through the change process. You might spend just a little bit of time in relapse and you get right back into contemplation. You might get right back into preparation and then action. Or you might stay there a long time. What I have given you over these last 3 episodes will give you the tools and the skills that you need to be in, if you go into a period of relapse, to get out of that stage and into the next stage more quickly. Here's the important part about relapse. Every time that it happens and you adapt and you learn and you grow and you figure out why it took place, what you need to do to improve your skills and either prevent it from happening again or simply increase the time to the next one, you are creating an upward spiral. Yes, an upward spiral. So many people believe that a relapse means you are going backwards. This simply is not the case. Relapses happen. But if you can learn from them, if you can figure out what you need to do differently, you can adapt and adjust, then you are ultimately leading yourself to the positive upward trajectory that you are looking for. But if you decide that this relapse is a problem, it is a personal reflection of you, it's something that you will continue to do, that you will never be able to figure this out, then you will go towards that downward spiral. You will stay in this relapse period for a long time. There are no time frames on this cycle of change. There are 6 different steps in the cycle of change. You can be in any one of these steps for a short period of time or a long extended period of time. You can shift from stage to stage. So the relapse itself isn't the problem. All right, as we wrap this up, I want you to take a moment and reflect where you are right now. Think about this with your journey with food right now. Where are you in the cycle of change? I want to recap the stages for you. There's stage number 1 is pre-contemplation. Stage number 2 is contemplation. Stage 3 is preparation. Stage 4 is action. Stage 5 is maintenance. And stage 6 is relapse. Now, because you are listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess that you are likely in preparation, action, or relapse. Now, again, this is just a guess, but let me tell you why I've guessed this. You're likely not in contemplation because in contemplation, you're not sure if change would even be beneficial. You don't really have any belief in yourself. Well, let's just go back to stage number 1. If you were in pre-contemplation, you don't even know there's a problem. You're not even searching for a podcast about this topic. So that's not likely the case. In contemplation, you're really not even sure that you want to change, if it would even be beneficial. So you're probably not actually looking for a podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that you know it would be helpful for you to become more calm, more connected, more confident with food, and that you at least have some belief in yourself. This is preparation. In the preparation phase, you're doing little things. Even if you think you aren't doing anything and your food choices don't look any different from day to day, by listening to this podcast, you are in preparation. You're already halfway through the cycle of change. This is a far cry from what you might be telling yourself, which if you're a person who's like, I'm not doing anything, I'm listening to this podcast, but I haven't changed a thing. I'm still eating all the food. I haven't done a thing. Or you're saying, I know what to do. I'm just not doing it. If you are listening to this podcast, even if you're not doing anything else with anything else, if you're not doing anything with food, if you're not trying to connect with yourself, if you're not working on the other concepts that we talk about, you are doing more than you realize. You're already in the preparation stage of the cycle of change. Now, in the action stage, you're doing much more. Preparation is like, I'm doing little things here and there. I'm listening to the podcast. I think I would like to change, but I'm not actually. There's just like little tiny things I'm doing. Now, in action, in stage number 4, you're doing much more. You're taking steps regularly. You're learning new skills. You're implementing them. You're experimenting with new ways to tend to yourself and your nervous system without turning to food. You're expanding your emotional capacity. You're experimenting with different ways of eating that feel nurturing, supportive, and sustainable. You aren't just doing the same things over and over again, hoping and praying that tomorrow will be different. Now, you may still feel like you have a ways to go. You're not there yet. But if you are taking steps, if you are experimenting, if you are trying new things, you are in the action stage. Now, if you're in the maintenance phase, this pretty much is like, this is who I am. This feels pretty good. This is just what I do now. So if you are in the maintenance phase, you might not be listening to this podcast anymore. What happens often is that you might find yourself more drawn to other topics. Other things are more interesting to you. And so you might be looking to implement change in another area of your life. Or you might also decide listening to this podcast is a way for you to stay in maintenance, and that you can apply what you learn here to so many other areas of your life while also staying grounded in your behavior change with food. That's also very possible. If you are in relapse, if you are aware that you're in relapse, you probably are listening. But if you aren't aware or you're in denial, you might not be listening yet. But when you return to the contemplation stage, as this cycle continues, this podcast and the last 2 episodes on setbacks will be waiting for you. This is a cycle. We go through all of the stages. This is how change works. There is no good or bad place to be in the cycle. The important thing is to be aware that there is a cycle and it's always in place. We are always somewhere on the cycle in any aspect of change. And remember, relapse is simply a part of the cycle. You can absolutely learn, grow, and adapt from any relapse and use it as an upward cycle to continue your process of change. So no matter how long you've been struggling with food, and no matter how many cycles you've been through, please know that change is possible. You might get to a point where you never have a relapse again, But if you don't, there is always the chance to get back onto the cycle after any relapse. Make that period of time shorter and shorter, and you will find some massive shifts for yourself. So no matter where you are in the cycle, remember that relapse is a normal part of the process. It's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn and to grow. And each time you go through a relapse, focus on shortening that time it takes you to get back on track. To continue receiving insights, support, and resources to help you on your journey, I invite you to join our community over on Substack. You can find it at janepilger.substack.com. I will put a link in the show notes. This is where you'll be able to also find the visual image of the cycle. And you can ask questions, you can connect with other people and get the guidance that you need to become more calm, connected, and confident with food. I would love to see you there. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening to Binge Breakthrough. If you want to understand why you feel out of control with food sometimes, I've created just the thing for you. Discover the number one reason why and get 3 things you can do today. Visit bingebreakthrough.com/quiz and you'll have your answer and your next steps within minutes. That's bingebreakthrough.com/quiz.